Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're going to end out our food movie festival with 2011 documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media.
That's what I heard.
Yep. We have festivals, we have 101s, we have that one scene, and right now we are at almost the tail end of our food movie festival.
That's right.
This is the last official entry. We will, in 2 weeks, be doing a bonus, a forgotten gem.
Yes.
But for now, to end out the festival, we are doing the 2011, is
That's
that right?
Yeah.
Film Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yeah.
This was really one of those kind of...
Have you seen this before?
I hadn't.
You hadn't? Okay.
I had seen some clips of it, and obviously everybody had heard of it in 2011 when it came out, because it was one of these documentaries that for whatever reason grabs a hold of the popular zeitgeist and becomes this beloved thing. And it really was. Everywhere that you were turning, you were hearing about this in 2011.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think Jiro Ono, who is the main character in this, it's about him. You know, he's 85-year-old sushi master in Tokyo, and still to this day is making sushi. This came out in 2000, and he's still alive, still working.
His poor son has not taken over.
His son does more stuff, I think, over the years, and I'm sure he's probably doing most of it. But he's still but this movie, you can't even, it was hard to get a reservation before this movie.
Oh, God.
And apparently after the movie, it's just yeah, you're going to have to wait a year.
Well, I think after this movie, Obama ate at the restaurant. And the thing of it is, we say restaurant, it's 10 seats.
10 seats. Yeah.
In the basement of a
it's a Subway.
Oh, is it in a Subway? I thought it was in an office building.
No, it's in the you go down. I think it's in a Subway.
It's just
it's wild, and it's 10 seats. It's in an underground subway station. Reservations are 1 month in advance at minimum.
Yeah,
which that's probably changed.
I mean, in the movie they were talking. It was months out. It was something like 6 months.
Yeah.
For some seats,
30,000 yen is the starting price, which is around 225 American dollars. But it's a whole experience. And tell me after you didn't watch this that you would not go and pay and do that.
Here's the thing too, is that it's not, I mean, I love sushi, but I'm a dumbass white dude living landlocked in America. The sushi I love is and then they light it on fire when they brought it out to you, and it's got all these little it's this is just here is this little strip of rice, here's this beautifully cut piece of fish on top of it, and then they put a little
wasabi in the middle,
and a little
and then that
thing
little,
on the top,
a brush of soy sauce mixture or something,
and then you're that's it, and it's the most simplistic, clean looking little things. But I was and
they do this thing with their fingers and the way they make it. It's all with their hands. Yeah, they have this little vat of rice,
sort of massaging it, and
well, it's funny you say that though, because I used to have a coworker, Makito, who is from Japan, and he explained that being a sushi maker in Japan is like being a doctor in the US.
Wow.
Jiro trains all these apprentices, but you have to work there 10 years before you get any kind of recognition.
Well, there's that moment. We have a lot of the sort of ins that we get for the secrets, because Jiro, I mean, his sons are definitely a little more verbose and they're willing to talk more. Jiro is just this presence, and the way he talks about the things he does are
fascinating guy.
Yeah, but they're he's so reserved in the way that he talks about his craft that one of our main ins is this food critic.
Yeah,
he's the only nice food critic that we've met in this festival.
I know, I was going to say that.
But he is he's a complete fanboy of Jiro, right? And but the way that he explains sort of what the process is, how important this work is, and really what it takes for someone to become a sushi chef who's worked with Jiro. He tells this story about these hand-pressed towels, right? Which are basically like pieces of cloth that have basically been boiled and then hand pressed and hand wound by the apprentices. And until they can actually do that without burning their hands, they're not even allowed to touch the fish.
That's wild.
Right? Like you do this, and when your hands stop burning because they're calloused enough, we'll let you clean the fish and cut the fish. Not cook the fish or prepare the sushi. Just touch it.
Which is wild. And Makoto was telling me that like it takes 2 to 3 years just to get rice right. Wow. So if you think about the intricacies, and obviously it's a cultural thing, the hard work, the dedication, the drive, the commitment to what he's doing it's a very Japanese thing, right? Like just the work ethic and perfectionist and all of this stuff. But he's also an artist, and he's doing something that's very simple. You get 20 pieces, I think, over the whole meal. No
appetizers. We don't do anything
they don't
else.
Appetizers or drinks, nothing. They just want you to have sushi. Obviously, I think you could probably have like a water or something, but there's no booze or anything like that. It's purely the sushi. The name of the movie is He Dreams of Sushi because he literally has ideas in his sleep about what he could do and how he can make something different. The whole side of how this was made. This is directed by David Gelb. He went on to do like Chef's Table and Street Food series, the stuff on Netflix. And you can see how, because it's very beautifully made. It's all about kind of the close-up, beautiful shots of, the crew or the food or the process or the people. Great looking movie, but you can see how that transferred into what he ended up making. But back when this came out, there wasn't really like a lot of movies, a lot of food docs. And if they were, it was more like social documentaries, or it's everything you put in your mouth is going to kill you.
So some Super Size Me kind of shit. Now let's talk about that for a minute, because one of the things I love about this documentary, and I was thinking about this a lot, just again, the work that I do.
It's PG too, which is
the work that I do working with kids and helping them to sort of understand how, whether it be a narrative film or a documentary, like what are the different ways in which you can craft that. And so often it's like there feels like there needs to be this capturing the Freeman level of like the thing that happens, quote unquote,
the event.
And what's great about Jiro is there is no event. Mm-hmm. All it is just a peek into this world that you know nothing about, right? And all these different concepts and ideas bubble to the surface that are so fascinating to discuss and talk about and think about. But nothing happens in this documentary. And
other than
that.
us just learning about him.
That's the thing.
It's educational.
And I have to say,
I honestly think everyone who wants to be a head chef, this should be required viewing.
Well, and this came out in 2011. I think that, we look a decade plus later, and you see that there, in particular after the pandemic, there is a lot of, to go all the way down the rabbit hole, there's a lot of grievance culture around the concept of work and the concept of labor, all the way up to even this idea of like, well, how does doing a thing you love versus the hours that you spend working? And what I found so fascinating about this movie is that it really is about art form and, to your point that you made earlier about work ethic, and this idea of what I'm probably going to mispronounce it, a shokunin is, right? Which is basically being an expert at your craft, right? And the amount of hours it takes to become an expert, and the amount of hours it takes to work, and that the work, if you can find the thing that you love, that work, it changes into something different. It does become identity based, and it does become this artisan, right? This craftsman.
He says it over and over. The secret is to find something you love and immerse yourself in it.
Let's go with Bukowski's similar one: find something you love and then let it kill you.
Yeah,
right. It's exactly. Sort of the same thing. But I think that is like, I love revisiting that now again in this sort of zeitgeist that we see right now, which is, well, find things that actualize your sense of self, not a job. And it's like, Well, Jiro's concept is that both meld into one another. Now, that being said, his son does talk about wanting to have been a Formula One racer. His sons do talk about wanting to go to college and they want to do something different. But that doesn't seem like that they have regrets, because there's also this cultural component that comes along with it of like, well, this is what our dad wanted us to do. And this is, and like the guy knows what he's doing. I mean, if you need to follow in your father's footsteps, but the dude happens to be
Yoshikazu is his son,
the greatest sushi maker of all time. It's not a bad thing to follow.
No doubt. Yoshikazu is the eldest son who is going to take over. He has a second son who opened a very similar restaurant of his own that he went off and did on his own.
Right.
And that was encouraged by Jiro and all of this stuff. You know, and I really...
Is it Jiro or Jiro?
Jiro.
Jiro, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyways,
all of
the food, you know, the food is so minimalist and simple, like we were talking about. But I think there is something, and I this is like a pet peeve of mine now, but it's basically restaurants that do one thing really good or give you a million things. Think of like Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, totally.
And there's like a fucking Bible-sized menu, and you're like, I don't know what I want. You're not like, I don't even, you have so much stuff that I don't, like, you can't be good at one thing if you have that many options, right? I'd much rather go to a chicken sandwich place and the only thing they do is chicken sandwiches, because you know that chicken sandwich is going to be fucking good,
right? Because
that's all they do.
But if you go back to a movie like Chef, like him making those Cubanos, it's like he knew that was a thing that he was really good at.
Yeah.
So he's like, this is it. This is what the truck is. This is what we do, right? Because we're going to do a kick-ass job at this one thing, rather than padding out a menu. And this is why I'm like, could you ever do it in America? Probably not, because that's, again, to go from a cultural standpoint, it's like being amazing at one minimalist thing is, for the masses, just never going to be enough, right? And what's interesting is that, again,
I think these days it is, though.
I mean, I think we're getting closer to that, but I do think that this thing that is said multiple times by multiple characters in this movie, that it's not about the money. It's never about the money. It's about doing this thing really, really well. And whether that be the guy who picks out the tunas, whether that be the guy who sells the rice, that they're like, my pride comes from knowing I'm part of the experience that Jiro then gets to show to these customers. Like, I get to be a piece of that. Like, hell no, I'm not selling you my rice because I know you don't know how to cook it. He does. So that's why I sell it to him. And you go, that is not an American capitalist concept, right? It is the inverse of that.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is part of what makes that concept, to watch it in a film, so refreshing and just kind of surreal, right?
I love that take. That's perfect way to describe that, and I hadn't really thought of it, but yeah, it's a very un-American thing.
To only have 10 seats is a very American thing. To be that. Like, we're not doing that. Sure. Like,
Yoshikazu, who's his son, throughout the movie, I'm just like, he has to feel this immense pressure, to live up to his father's legacy, but he also talks about, hey, people are born with a natural gift. You have an elevated palate or a sense of smell that enhances what you can do and allows you to, look at Remy and Ratatouille, right?
That's the thing. And I love when he talks about this. And I love this, like, again, we're in this weird office space style tile corridor where there's just like the one little open stovetop sitting there, and they're doing this whipping.
Yeah, they're in the hallway, like with the it's like the soy paper you put around.
Yeah, it's the seaweed paper, and he's doing this very delicate thing, but he's talking about it like he's talking about anything, and but it's so effective to me. This idea of like, look, if you do anything for long enough, you're going to get good at it because you're going to learn. Beyond that, there's actual talent, and you're kind of born with it. It's kind of innate.
Yep.
And you're not, either you're going to do that thing or you're not. And you at that moment, you don't know if he's talking about the other apprentices or himself, vis-a-vis his dad. You don't really know. And he's kind of like, look, it's just how shit works.
I will say that I think he's going to do an awesome job. Because I feel like at the beginning of the movie, I kind of remember watching the first time thinking that guy doesn't have it. Like, he just doesn't have the confidence.
Maybe doesn't seem like he's into it.
And by the end of this watch, I'm like, I think he knows what he's getting into. He's been doing it, the same amount of time his dad has at that age or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was born into it. And so by the end of the movie, I was like, oh, he does have the confidence to be just as good as his dad. Does he have the natural talent? That's the question in the air that no one can answer.
Yeah, and I think that it's really interesting. Jiro basically tells his youngest son, like, all right, man, sink or swim, you got to go and do this shit, because Jiro will never give the second son his restaurant, right? That culturally it's the eldest who gets it. But that meant that the younger son found his footing first and has his own place first, and like has had to negotiate like being out on his own, right? And the independence of that. Whereas the elder son is going to need to stick around until his dad either probably just dies. I mean, his dad's never going to retire, right? So he's just sticking around until his dad dies, and still doesn't have his footing underneath him. Even though he probably does it a lot, he's still in his dad's shadow.
Sure.
And I'm like, what a very interesting and kind of complex cultural phenomenon to be like, that's the way that it worked out. And to see those two sons talking about their childhood together.
Is it? That was a great. It was great. But like, is it more honorable to wait that out, right? Like, and that's it. And like, it's got to be an internal emotional battle, though.
Those little elements reminded me of, obviously, we're talking about two different cultures and societies here, but it reminded me of the question of individualistic society versus collective society discussion that we had when we did The Farewell, which is, again, very much looking at these ideas of like, are you following culture and the traditions associated with that have to do with honor and respect, or are you striving out to do your own thing? And what's interesting is that as much as Jiro raised both of his sons in this very traditional culture of, you are going to follow in my footsteps.
I mean, he didn't really raise them at all.
but I guess influence them to follow in that.
Yes.
What's interesting is he has zero traditional impulses when it comes to his own parents. He even talks shit about it when they're at the gravesite, and he's like, hey, man, all these flowers are dead, and like, who gives a shit anyway? Let's get out of here. And his son's like, Dad, that's really disrespectful to do that in front of your ancestors. But Jiro basically raised himself. He's like, my dad drank too much. He didn't teach me shit. And I was out on the streets on my own when I was 11 years old or whatever, and like had to figure it out on my own. So when it comes to his own sense of history and lineage, he could give a fuck. But when it comes to his own sons, he's like, I have expectations for you guys. Sure. And you go, at that point, it's not even about being Japanese anymore. It's just about being Jiro's son, right? And he could be from any background and be like, y'all are going to do sushi because I did this and I'm the best at it, and this is what I want for you.
Well, I mean, as a parent, you want to teach your children what, show them what you love and hope they love it too, right? Yeah. And so I think there's part of that. I think there's part of him not being there when they were kids. I think one of the sons tells a story about how he slept in one day and
there's a weird man in our house.
This weird guy sleeping on our couch.
I love those stories from their childhood. I love the CocaCola story.
Oh, yeah.
They were so poor that it was like, he's like, yeah, back in the day, like the juice was at the bottom and then everything else was at the top. So you had to shake it up. He's like, we did that with our Coke can and then we opened it on the bus and it shot everywhere. And he's like, I think he still resents me.
Yeah.
Because we only got half a Coke can after it was done. And he's like, I do. He's very funny.
But he's also very hard-nosed. Like, people are intimidated when they go into his restaurant because he's standing there, and you watch him make it. And honestly, like, I was so hungry after this movie. It was starving. But it's all about talent, the hard work. He has routines for all the stuff, not easy to work for. It doesn't seem like, like everyone wants to quit at some point.
Yeah.
Some apprentices last one day. But
there's a great fly on the wall of that where they are hanging out around the table with the apprentices. And
Yes.
Jiro's son, you said his name. What's his?
Which one? The Yoshikazu?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Yoshi says something like, "Oh yeah, you got your dream job now." And the camera does this beautiful little pan over to one of those apprentices, and the apprentice doesn't say jack shit. He kind of like looks at his shoes a little bit, and he's like, "Oh, let me get another piece of that." Like, you know, and you're just like, "Yeah, that kid's probably not going to last, right?" Like they're like, I realize I am like in the hot seat here, but this is hard, and I don't know if I even want to do this for my life, right? And
Yeah.
I love that the movie, yes, it is a traditional Head and Shoulders interview style with B-roll,
Like documentary.
documentary style. However, the way in which it didn't feel like a fly on the wall in the sense of like the way some Herzog docs feel, but it felt, the interviews felt really natural.
I agree, especially when they're like in the markets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And none of these people were prepared to be interviewed that day. They just want to know, you know.
That natural aspect that you're talking about, where sometimes it's even just if Yoshi's like, yeah, and like, you know, when we come down here, like, we got to get the best fish from blah, blah, blah. And like, he's the guy. And he's like, and my dad always said so, right? And then the guy he's talking about's right back there and turns around and goes, oh, yeah, I am the guy, da, da, da. And you're like, oh, yeah, this feels improvisational. It feels not fly on a wall as much as like maybe like a film crew doing a news report at times.
Sure.
Like in this very much like, I'm going to be your tour guide through this stuff. And I thought that was so interesting. Like this director, you said his name earlier. What's his name?
David Gelb.
David Gelb. So
Gelb, maybe.
Gelb. Couple questions. One, does that guy speak Japanese? Like, how did he find?
I think he had a translator.
Because I'm like,
He was a white guy, I think. So
I'm like the ins for how this all works, especially in this conversational ways.
Yeah.
There's gold that they're capturing, and I'm like, just logistically,
pretty
I'm
impressive.
like, does the director know in the moments that he's capturing gold? Like, how hard is that edit? Like, what does that look
true,
like?
yeah, I don't know.
Like, I was just like, oh, that feels like a headache.
But just like Jiro has to build trust with the vendors, he probably had to build trust with Jiro, and you know, similar type of thing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, hey, I've eaten at your restaurant. You know, I think you're a fascinating person. I would love to do a document. You know, having to have,
Yeah.
you know, has to put his faith in that, and it's pretty interesting. The examination of the food inside of here, where especially on the market.
that's what I want to talk about is the vendors.
It's like a stock market floor when sometimes where they're like doing all this stuff, but they also really get into the different kinds of tuna, you know, and like they get into like the fatty and the lean and the medium and all of these different things. And just the detail of what they got into was really fascinating.
Did you know that tuna got that big? I had no. These are
The
like
size of
dude.
them?
They're
Yeah, they're
like
huge.
something from a fucking H.P. Lovecraft story. Like they're massive.
I did not know they were that
like
big, no.
to me like this. Like I didn't know they're like the size of swordfish. I had no clue.
Massive.
I did
It's
not
as big
know
as
that.
you.
Yeah, it
or
seriously,
me.
and it's like the fact that they're the guy, the vendor that sells to them
And they all have these little flashlights.
has the little flashlight, and literally, he's like, there's a scene where he's like, yeah, I showed up here and they told me there was a room full of fish. He's like, there's not, and they're all behind him, and you're like, yeah, because you're gonna leave here with maybe one. Right, and he
like,
pushes his thumb into it, and then he does
There's
his
10
flashlight,
fish.
and
Everyone says they're the best fish. He's like, no, there's one best.
that's the only one he gets.
Yeah.
And then that's the only one that Jiro gets, and like all of it is predicated upon the idea of like, all I'm thinking about when I get this one fish is that one guy.
Yeah.
And again, like, and I'm sure that I'm sure you've experienced this a lot recently, just with your new job and sort of like being more out in the marketplace. But even being at my same career for so long, I hate our society's capitalization of, oh, you're good at a thing, so, but you can't just be good at a thing and you're like, and I'm good at good at a thing and this is what I can produce. Instead, it's like, well, if you're good at it, we're going to give you a whole team and you're going to train that team to be as good as you are so you can make 40 of these things. And you're like, that's not the same thing. Like, but I'm just good at this, right? There was an ongoing theme of that in this movie of like smaller, 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 quality, quality, quality. It's not about the money. It's not about it being fast. It's about taking your time and it being right.
It's the experience.
And that I fell so in love with just that because I've been feeling that pressure so much in my own life of this sort of like, how do we scale this thing you're doing? And you're like, well, you can, but the second you scale it, the quality is going to go down to maybe half. Like, I don't know, right? Because I only know how to do it at this scale. And that this movie's all about staying at that scale and just being like, that's it. And you can either love that or you can go eat at McDonald's is like so cool to me. Like, it's just, there's something about that felt so foreign, not in a foreign country kind of a way, but just in a way of like our society of being like, no, I need it 20 minutes quicker than you did it. And I need 50% more.
Yeah.
This is like, well, you're never going to get that. And we have the Michelin stars. So fuck you.
It's
like,
true.
that's,
I mean,
I don't want to say that it's the soup Nazi, but it's the soup Nazi. Like, it's kind of amazing to be like, this is what it looks like and no bread.
No
like,
fish
this
for
is
you.
what you get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's such a lost art on its own merit.
I agree. I
right?
mean, they even talk about, I think it's the eldest brother talks about the kind of the sushi craze, right?
Yeah.
Because now it's on conveyor belts and you can just get it anywhere, which is slowly depleting all of the good fish, and they're capturing things. And he has this great statement where he talks about you have to, and this is something again you would never hear in America, you have to balance profits with preserving natural resources.
Otherwise, all the fish are gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There has to be a balance.
Well, and also that the entire idea of sushi within that culture, within the Japanese culture, is about it being this: get the right fish, get the right cut of the right fish, let the rice cook for X amount of time.
Let it age a certain amount of days.
And let it
Marinate.
give it X amount of pressure for X amount of days. Like, all of it is this weight.
And he's tasting every day.
So that the thing is perfect. And you go, if you're commodifying that to be that I can go to this fucking Smith's Marketplace and be like, here's my plastic package of 20 pieces of sushi and that's what I'm going to eat tonight. And you just go,
compare it to what Jiro's doing.
It's almost anathema of the importance of the thing, right? It's almost flying in the face. It's almost an insult to the actual thing to be like, you know, this one's got ketchup on it and like we put little sparklers in the top of it. You're like, no, we did that. That's going to be on us. Like, right?
I've had some gross grocery store sushi.
I mean, me
but
too, man. I think 7-Eleven has sold it before.
Back to Makito, he like was embarrassed to tell his family that he even ate sushi over here because it's so different.
Yeah. And you just go, yeah,
even though he still did, he just was like, it doesn't even compare.
Yeah. And it's because it's an art form that requires a certain level of attention.
And also was created in Japan.
Yeah. that literally we're incapable of replicating in the same way. That's not to say that like I haven't had great sushi in America, but I'm sure if I went and had that, I'd be like, I've finally had sushi for the first time in my life.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah. It's absolutely true.
But I think that again, going back to the entire concept of the festival, it's one of the things that's really fascinating about the idea of food and the way that culture is associated with food is that there are these certain kinds of food where there is this almost like talismanic attachment to other things. I'm thinking of the great scene in Sideways, that's where she's talking about a great bottle of wine, and like that part of it is that you have to wait. You don't get a choice.
Yeah.
The only way it's going to, you couldn't add things to it to make it do the thing that time can. So you literally need to wait, right? And that the waiting is part of the experience. And I would say in the same way, the only 10 seats, the only 20 pieces, the hour and a half of commitment that it takes, that's it. that's the commitment that you need to be willing to make in order to have that experience. And that's not just cultural, that's philosophical. Some people are not going to be willing to do that.
Well, and one guy comes in, and
this is exactly what I was thinking about.
One guy comes in, he's like, "Hey, can I make a reservation here?" He's like, "Yeah, we're a month out." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "I came from a lot far away."
Yeah, and he's like, "Yeah, we know."
So
Lots
that guy's
of people
going to
do.
go back and wait a month just to eat here.
But he needs also clarification of like beverages, no beverages, appetizers, no appetizers, entrees, no entrees, only sushi. And he's like, "Okay, all right,
see you in a month."
And like, I think that is, it's just a bygone concept of how to do things.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. And the work ethic and everything that he's doing is amazing. Although, and maybe this is the American in me, looks at Yoshikazu, and basically at a certain point in the movie, Jiro's like, all he has to do is the same thing for the rest of his life and he'll be good. And I'm just like, are these expectations maybe a little high?
Yeah.
How unrealistic are these expectations that you're setting? Because the higher they are, the more variability of failure could be there, right?
Well, and we have the older. I love they found this guy, the older apprentice who now has his own shop, and he's like,
something definitely happened to him. Like he is got burned or something.
But he also has like a pretty middle ground philosophy about everything, because he's like,
it's true.
He's like, yeah, Jiro's the best. Like, I worked underneath him, and he's like, and I do a good, I do a good job, and I have my own shop, and I love it, and it's good. And he's like, it ain't going to be as good as him. And his son,
he's probably not going to be as good.
He's not going to be as good. And he's like, and even if his work literally is as good, the perception will be it'll never be as good,
exactly.
Right? And I think
you're not your dad.
Yeah, and that's very realistic. And I think
it's nepo babies all over the.
I mean, and also just there's that moment in Pig where he says to the guy who wanted to originally have his Irish pub, but then ended up making bougie ass bullshit food, where he's like, nobody knows who you are because you never showed them. You're just doing this bullshit. This isn't, you never cared about this, right? And I think that that's
your pub.
And right. And I think that that's what Yoshi is dealing with as the son. Is he probably has a bunch of great ideas, and he's like, how far outside of my father's shadow will I be able to step? Is that even a good idea? Will I be called a phony if I do it, right? Or is it more important to keep with the tradition and never show anybody who I truly am? And all I have to do is do that for the rest of my life, and I'll be okay.
Just do the same thing for the rest of your life every day.
And you go, what's that worth? Technically, the dude could just walk away the second his dad dies and be like, I'm never going to be as good as him. I never really wanted to do it, but I also didn't want to disappoint him. But now I can go race my cars because I can inherit this whole thing, and it'll never be that good. It's those complexities that make for such an interesting story when you're talking about the artistic integrity of a particular person to never sell out. But that also means working every day, missing all of your kids' birthdays. We never even meet Jiro's wife.
No. I mean,
is she even still around yet?
I don't know.
How does she feel about him working literally every single day?
That's what I was going to say. I think the reason is because he probably is divorced, and I mean, he married his job.
Yeah. But is happy with it. And so there's this other part of it too of like, well, don't become your job because then you're a sucker. And it's like,
that's a cultural thing though.
But what if it's cultural, but I think it's also artistic, because there's a second layer to that of like, I love my job. I mean, I'm not there as much as Jiro is, but I love my job, and it does impede upon me making my own art. I mean, I get to do shit like this, which is rad, but it's definitely impeded upon other kinds of art that I've made in my life. But that doesn't bother me because I'm fulfilled by it.
And that's really all it comes down to.
But it is a weird divide,
people have different
right?
level of what makes them happy, right? What fulfills them. And yeah, if you have that work ethic and that drive, then you're never going to be fulfilled. And that's why you're so good at it. It's 10,000 hours, Malcolm Gladwell, right?
My God, it is. But Jiro also, even though he is Jiro, who dreams of sushi, who this documentary is about, is totally fanboying about that one French chef where he's like, oh, if I had his palate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're 85 years old and you're talking about, oh, if I only was this guy, I'd be better at what I do. It just makes you realize, like, you never get to the end of it.
I think it's so important for Americans to watch movies like this.
Yeah, totally.
Just to see the cultural, and what we talk about all the time is creating empathy, right? To different cultures and other people, and understanding their lives and their cultures and why they're that way in certain ways. So I think it's super important. So
and just having your mind blown by the tenacity of other families and cultures that come from a different background that are like, this is the way we do it.
That it takes 2 to 3 years to get the rice right is just insane. That's
amazing.
So wild, and such a different way of thinking. Because in America, it's fast, good now.
Yeah,
or
good
whatever.
enough.
Cheap, fast, good. I mean, you can't have all three of those. It's usually two.
Yeah, you only get two.
I'm so glad this director went on to make those movies like Chef's Table, because it really is about the cultural experiences of these and you know, the heritage of families and what they cooked and the memories that food can bring you and all of this stuff. But the film is impeccably made, just like his Sushi, which I wonder is that another element of pressure for the filmmaker to be like, fuck, I better make this like the best movie ever.
If I don't get this right,
Jiro's
gonna be mad at me. I don't want Jiro mad at me. It is, you know, and I haven't really, we haven't talked a lot about it, but I love some of the time lapse things that happen here. I love the way the camera moves around at places like the market. It's gorgeous looking.
It's very fly on the wall, though.
It's very fly on the wall, but it's also, I mean, there are moments of this that feel like Koyaanisqatsi almost, like the way that the music is churning and pulsing, and the way that we're watching time lapses of people running around and doing things. It's gorgeous. It's also like, it's stripped down and clean looking. Even at the market, which I'm like, that's a wet market. It has not clean place.
It's true.
But it looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like everything, all the surfaces are shiny, and like, it's just beautifully done.
Yeah, great movie.
And a lot of times I would say the mark of a great documentary filmmaker is that a lot of it goes by without you noticing it. You just are drinking it in. It's osmosis.
And again,
right?
I think this should be required viewing for anyone who wants to be in the culinary industry and has the passion to like get to a level of a chef or whatever. But again, this is a PG movie about art, quality, legacy. You know, like all these things.
Culture, sort of the parental pressure, and what do you do with your life?
Yeah.
And nothing happens in it.
It's true. They just make sushi.
It's amazing, and it's kind of mind-boggling, and nothing happens in it.
Yeah.
It's like My Dinner with Andre. Nothing happens.
It's true.
And it's great, and you should watch it.
Awesome. Well, please watch it. That's the end of the Food Movie Festival. We will have a bonus episode. We're doing a Forgotten Gem Big Night. I can't wait to gush about Tony Shalhoub, because he's just one of the best.
Yeah.
Him and Stanley Tucci, and just an excellent
brothers,
movie that's forgotten.
it's so perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
But so stay tuned, subscribe, like and subscribe, give us a comment. Let us know what you think of the review, the movie itself. On YouTube, hit the bell icon. Instagram is our most active social channel as well. So go ahead and join us, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, you guys.
See you.